into two categories, the motor cortex and the brainstem center. We have talked about this one, and the motor cortex influence through the corticospinal and brainstem through the medial and lateral descending pathway, which may be rubrospinal, reticulo or vestibulospinal tract. So, lateral descending tracts, the lateral descending tracts are lateral corticospinal tract, and what was that lateral corticospinal tract is coming from the cortex, and this rubrospinal tract was lateral brainstem descending pathway, okay, rubrospinal tract. Now, the medial descending coming from the this one corticospinal tract is anterior corticospinal or ventral corticospinal tract. And what about the pathway that is coming from the medial descending brainstem? Tectospinal, reticulo and vestibulo, right. Now, so we can say the descending tracts. Now, these descending tracts, they can be divided into pyramidal and extrapyramidal. At times it becomes confusing. Why confusion? Like we forget which one is the pyramidal and which one is the extrapyramidal. So, the division is, see, few of the books they changes why it is called as pyramidal and extrapyramidal, but mostly the consensus is the pyramidal is because they form the pyramid in the medulla that we have seen in the previous slide. Like the descending tracts which is coming from the cortex, the corticospinal, corticobulbar, they will, mainly the corticospinal one, they will decussate or pass on to the opposite side at the pyramid formation within the medulla, right. That is the characteristic feature of the medulla. So, the tracts which form the pyramid, they are called as pyramidal system, and these are mostly the corticospinal and few of the corticobulbar. The remaining one, they are the extrapyramidal one. So, extrapyramidal descending tracts are the one mainly which originates from the brainstem, not from the cortex, okay, not from the cortex. Cortically originated extrapyramidal system are very few, forget about that thing, there is no need to go into that detail, very minimal percentage. Mainly they are subcortical originated, mainly from the brainstem, like the rubrospinal tract, vestibulospinal tract, reticulospinal tract, tectospinal tract, olivospinal tract, they are the extrapyramidal one. So, descending tract we can say the cerebral cortex one, the corticospinal, midbrain one, the tectospinal, rubrospinal, vestibulospinal, then this is reticulospinal tract, okay. So, the pyramidal tract, the corticospinal tract are further divided into lateral corticospinal and ventral corticospinal, this green one, and these are corticobulbar depending on whether they are coming out from the midbrain or the pons or the medulla, okay. So, the corticospinal tract, they originate, we know that from the primary motor area, premotor area, primary somatosensory cortex 30-40%, and they originate from giant cell of the bed 3%, and mainly the other area that is the 97%. These are the pyramidal cells of the layer 5. So, if we look at this diagram, the ventral corticospinal tract, what we are looking over here, this ventral corticospinal tract is coming from the same side and ending on the same side, right. This is one feature. Secondly, the collateral from this is going to these medial descending pathways, medial brainstem descending pathways. These are the reticulospinal and vestibulospinal. Bilateral itself will end on the ipsilateral spinal cord, but it gives collateral to the bilateral medial descending brainstem descending pathway, okay. Now, this part this is lateral corticospinal tract. First of all, look over here in the ventral corticospinal tract, it is originating mainly from the area number 4 and 6, means primary motor cortex and premotor cortex. And if we look at the lateral corticospinal, mostly it is originating from the 3, all the 3, area number 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, primary motor, premotor as well as the somatosensory cortex, right. And what happens? It will go and at the, these are the pyramidal decussation in the medulla, at the lower part of the medulla, it will decussate to the opposite side, it will decussate to the opposite side, and via the lateral corticospinal tract it will travel within the spinal cord and end at these ventral aspect or the lateral aspect of the spinal cord. Okay, spinal cord. And this is rubrospinal tract. Rubrospinal tract is going to the opposite side. Now, if we look at these pathway of the corticospinal tract, it descends via the corona radiata. So, I drew the diagram in that page part, that in between those basal ganglia, that is the internal capsule. So, before it forms a internal capsule, it regroups in the internal capsule. So, at the initial part it is totally spread out. These axons are coming from different part of the area, like the primary motor or the premotor or the somatosensory. This thing is called as corona radiata, this scattered. Now, they will group together, pass through the internal capsule. Okay. They converge and pass through the internal capsule. Mainly they will occupy the genu and the anterior 2/3 of the posterior limb, pass via the middle third of the cerebral peduncle, then broken into discrete bundle by the pontine nuclei. This one we have covered, like it will in between the pontine nuclei it will again get scattered, and then it will regroup at the lower border of the pons, organized into compact bundle and forms pyramid on the ventral aspect of the medulla, and out of those 80% will cross synapse with the anterior horn cell of the spinal cord, that is lateral corticospinal, and 20% will be uncrossed, and some of them some of the books say they will disappear at the thoracic tract level via the ventral corticospinal tract. So, forget about this term, disappear at the thoracic level, that we will cover in the next class. What does it mean? The ventral corticospinal tract, it ends at the dorsal column, right? It travels by the dorsal, and this one dorsal part, not the dorsal part, actually it will go and end at the uppermost part of the trunk, we can say. In the detail we will cover in the next class, like why it is saying that it disappears at the thoracic level or not. Okay. So, this is again the diagram of the anterior corticospinal tract and the lateral corticospinal tract. Now, the lateral corticospinal tract was involved for the skilled movement, right, and ventral one was for maintaining the medial, axial and proximal limb muscle, right. That is why, okay, I do not want you to get confused in this one. This one is saying, like say we will cover this part over here, 20% of these uncrossed one, he is saying disappear at the thoracic level. The meaning of that is, like if you can recall back, we have covered the proprio, the this one proprio sepsion neurons in the case of the spinal cord, right. Like there is the interneuron, then there was the motor neuron, then there was the projection, and the one which was spreading throughout the spinal cord, like if one which is getting originated in the L1, it was going up to the height as much as to the neck level, the cervical level. So, these tracts, these 20% uncrossed the ventral corticospinal tract, they will end up over there. So, if they ends over at the upper trunk only or at the neck level, then those neurons which are spread throughout the spinal cord, so via these it will affect the entire axial system. Okay. Now, the corticospinal tract, again this diagram. So, what are the functions? The ventral corticospinal tract, they control gross voluntary movement, walking and climbing, where there is a need of maintenance of the axial and proximal muscle, axial skeleton and proximal muscle. Now, the lateral corticospinal tract, it controls voluntary fine scaled movement, the distal musculature of the limbs, right, and they facilitate the superficial reflex, they facilitate the muscle tone. Now, I am not covering the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. In the next slide, not the next slide, in the next class we will talk about the lesions, what will happen if there is a lesion in the spinal cord, what will happen if there are the lesion at the higher center like decerebrate and decorticate rigidity, and at that particular time I will talk about the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. Okay. Otherwise it will become a very long class, that is why I am skipping that part. In the next class all these things will be covered. So, among those we will discuss why it facilitates the superficial reflex and muscle tone. Now, coming to the corticobulbar and the corticonuclear part. Now, the origin of these corticobulbar is motor cortex and termination cell body of the cranial nerves. They descend along the pyramidal tract, cross to the opposite side throughout the brainstem and synapse with the cranial nuclei, and this act as upper motor neuron for these cranial nerve, and these nerves are affected in bulbar paralysis. Okay. Now, coming to the brainstem pathway, brainstem, medial and lateral. Among the medial, reticulospinal, vestibulospinal and tectospinal, right, and they control the axial and proximal muscle that we have covered. Lateral one, they are lateral corticospinal tract, and among the lateral brainstem pathway they were rubrospinal tract, right, and rubrospinal tract excite the flexor motor neuron and inhibit the extensor motor neuron. This is the point to be remembered. Like rubrospinal tracts, they excite the flexor motor neuron and inhibit the extensor motor neuron. Though they are not very prominent in the human beings, as I said, they are mainly prominent among the four-limbed like the cat and dog. They are in monkey, they are more prominent, but not in among the human beings. They project to the interneuron in dorsolateral part of the spinal ventral horn to influence motor neuron that control the distal limb muscles. If we look over here, this medial brainstem pathway, this is the lateral and medial vestibulospinal tract. This one is this is coming from the tectum, tectospinal tract, and the one which is coming from reticular formation, these are the reticulospinal tract. The reticulospinal tract are again of two types, medial and lateral, or we can say the pontine and this one where is this, pontine and medullary reticulospinal tract. Okay. Similarly, now coming to this lateral brainstem pathway, this is from the red nucleus, magnocellular part of the red nucleus, and then it crosses to the opposite side, and over here it ends in this lateral aspect. Okay, lateral aspect. Now coming to the extrapyramidal one, which are not the part of the pyramid. All motor pathways which are not part of the pyramidal system, they are the extrapyramidal one. Mainly these pathways, they control the axial muscle that maintain balance in posture, muscle controlling the coarse movement of the proximal portion of the limb, head, neck and eye movement, not the distal one, proximal muscle and axial muscles.